Hi, I'm Dr. Cindy Dupuy. I have a PhD in learning disabilities, and I do diagnostic assessments, advocacy, and a little bit of intervention for the kids that I work with.
Hi, my name is Kim Sharman. I've worked with kids for the last 15 years who have dyslexia, dysgraphia, and ADHD. And I understand and I've worked with a variety of different programs that are made specifically for kids with dyslexia.
And so today we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about phonemic awareness.
Mm.
Are we excited about that?
Yes. What is a phoneme, Cindy?
Oh, Kim, what is a phoneme? I'm going to let you do it because you teach so much more reading than I do.
Well, sometimes I get confused with all the words, but tell me if I'm
Okay.
wrong. A phoneme is an individual sound within a word. Each letter represents a different sound.
And actually, do you know how many phonemes there are?
I really don't.
I do believe there are 44 phonemes.
So 44 sounds.
There are 44 sounds in the English language.
And that includes both vowels and consonants.
That would be correct.
Okay.
Yes. And so one of the things that we talk about extensively is the need for phonemic awareness. Now, you had a daughter who struggled to learn how to read, right?
Correct.
Tell me what her early reading looked like.
Um, well, actually, I'll even go before that. When I used to sit and read to her, and I would read both of my kids nursery rhymes, things that rhymed at the end of each line. What I realized is that this daughter would mush the words. She couldn't, even though I would say these nursery rhymes over and over and over, she couldn't hear or recognize the patterns of the rhyming sounds at the end of the lines in the nursery rhyme. And why was that?
Well, so neurologically, kids activate different part of their brains as they begin to listen and manipulate those individual phonemes. Now, kids can have lots of problems working with phonemes, and it can occur in different parts in the system. And the reason I'm pointing to my ear is because it's not so much about the eardrum. It's not about being deaf, right? It's not about, can I get the sound into my ear? It has to do with how the sound travels from that ear into the lower brain and then up into the brain itself. So it goes into the lower brain stem and then it jumps up in here. And what we find in a lot of kids that are struggling to learn how to read, they have difficulty recognizing the phonemes and they struggle to manipulate the phonemes. So let's talk about one of the most common things that we do, which is rhyming. Now, what did you do with your daughter when it was time to rhyme?
I would read books that I have tons of books that would rhyme.
Like
Is
Dr.
your
Seuss kind
mama
of things?
yeah, I mean, is your mama a llama? I asked my friend Dave. No, she is not is the answer Dave gave. So that would be an example
Oh,
of a pattern of rhyming.
okay. Well, I have
Um,
to tell you, as a kid, I was horrible at this.
really?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. But,
So she would say it, but she go, is the answer like she would smush it out at the end. And that was it like 18 months, 19 months, 20, I mean, that was the first sign that I could tell.
okay, so now I'm going to tell a really embarrassing story. When I was in graduate school at Northwestern, we were sitting in a class talking about the neurology of the brain. And the professor made a comment about rhymes. And I was like, why can't you rhyme the beginning of a word? And they're all just looking at me like I'm absolutely
Ah,
nuts. And even as an adult who's fairly well educated, I mean, I have a bachelor's degree in chemistry and I have a master's degree in secondary education. Here I'm sitting at Northwestern University in this highly competitive program going, oh, you mean words can't rhyme at the beginning? They have to rhyme at the end?
that's amazing. So really you had never noticed rhymes.
I didn't understand rhyme. I didn't understand the whole element of it. And I eventually went on to get trained in how to teach reading, right? But at the time, still as an adult, with untreated in any way, shape, or form dyslexia, I was still struggling with that.
And why is
So
that important for a kid, a little kid before going to kindergarten to kind of be able to recognize those?
because that rhyme pattern, that ability to hear and manipulate those phonemes becomes such a critical piece in learning how to read. So when you see a word like sun, and then you want to turn it into bun, and then you want to turn it into ton, you're manipulating just one phoneme in each of those. And if that's hard for you, when you get a word like fantastic, you're going to have a hard time sounding out each of those syllables and blending them back together. So one of the things that we look at is rhyme, but that's not the only thing that we look at. Do you know what's your other activity that you do a lot? Do you do this thing with your fingers that I do all the time, which is to go sweep across?
I
Do you
do
know what
not
that
do that.
is?
No, show me.
Oh, okay. So this is when I'm teaching a kid how to sound out a word. And so let's say we have the word oh, now I'm going to struggle with this because it's not well thought out ahead of time. Let's say let's pick something simple like cat. And actually, I have to tell you a story about this, not going into too much detail. So when you have a word like cat, you would sound out and go k, ah, t, and then you blend it together. Cat. Okay. Now, one of my prior students had sat through two different clinicians teaching them how to read. And I was working with her on spelling, and I said, all right, let's sound it out. K, ah, t. Now write it. And she would write something else altogether. I'm like, no, wait, slow down. Let's try this again. K, ah, t. That spells. And then ask her to write. She's like, giving me something different. I'm like, why do you think I'm going like this? And she said, I have no idea. People have been doing this for years and it makes no sense. And so then I explained it to her as like, that's supposed to help you blend it and hear the phonemes so you can spell it. And it was like this boom, light bulb moment. She was like, oh my gosh, I never knew. I never understood this.
So you're saying that she didn't know how to combine sounds and flow them together.
She couldn't do that, and then she couldn't separate them. So this whole idea of let's count phonemes, because her ear wasn't trained enough, because she couldn't hear and manipulate those phonemes, she couldn't sound out a word to spell it. So she had amazing wild spelling. Amazing wild spelling.
Well, another reason why sometimes that happens, and I don't know if I'm allowed to talk about my genius student who had memorized 800,000 out of a million words. But when I asked him to tell me the phonemes or the sounds in the word stamp, he looked at me. This is a kid who could decode 12 not decode, who had memorized 12 syllable words. He looked at me, he looked in my eyes, and he goes,
yeah,
that was it. That was it. He didn't. So one of the things that kids get in the habit of, what we call fake reading, is they memorize entire words.
Yep.
And when you start this, I know that we have something called sight words that we do have to memorize, like and of and they, in order to flow when you're reading. But you cannot memorize a million words. That's how many we have in the English language. You cannot memorize a million words and also get full comprehension and full fluidity and fluency in your writing. It's too difficult to memorize a million words. And that's what happened. And I had to go back and teach.
That makes perfect sense. So we've talked about rhyme. We've talked about hearing the individual sounds. Now, one of the other things that we frequently do when we talk about phonemic awareness is we ask kids to play with sounds, like delete a sound or count a sound. So one of the most common activities is we'll give a kid an oral word, like say slip. Now say slip without saying the ol sound, which yields
sit.
And when I was a kid, I could not do that to save my life.
So you're not writing anything down. You're literally
No, it's all auditory. You can't see it, or you have to see it in your brain. And I still watch a bunch of my dyslexic kids spell it in their brain, and then they'll delete the sound and then they'll read the new word, but they're not doing it by sound. And you know how I catch them?
how?
I give them words where they have, for example, the letter X in it, and then ask them to delete one of the two sounds in the X word.
Oh, that's hard.
It
Okay.
is. So you get a word like
Like
pixel.
sit. Okay.
What were you thinking?
I was thinking just the word six.
Ah, okay. So let's take six. And if you were going to delete the k sound from it,
It would turn into sis.
and I have to tell you, Kim, I was following you there, and the minute like you come out with it like that, and I'm like, wait, I have to think.
So, but explain to them why. Why is that hard?
Because uh, I can't hear and separate those sounds easily. To me, it's an intellectual task, not an auditory task. Like
So you don't see the word in your head, and like I see
I
it
can't
and hear it.
segment and delete a phoneme in the middle of a word. Like I can do slip because I've done it 900 times. But if you give me something like this or fix, like I'm like befuddled because I can't naturally like segment all those sounds, delete one out, and then slam them all back together. Like it's really hard for me.
So,
I tell parents all the time the only reason I can do the test is because the answers are there.
so tell me this. So can that be fixed? I mean, that definitely can be fixed.
Absolutely.
So it can be fixed with writing and reading.
Absolutely. So,
Okay.
I mean, the irony, and my students tell me this all the time, is I could go back and get the training to do this, and I'm just too lazy to do it
Or too busy.
or too busy. One would argue that if with doing what I do, I'm not lazy. I have plenty
Yeah.
of it.
So
But
that's really interesting because people don't. Can we tell them the one word jump? How you can always ask a dyslexic kid to spell jump and what they say.
let me spell jump for you.
Oh, really?
Or
Usually they do this. Well, usually they do JUP.
JUP. There we go.
Yeah. And you want to know why they miss the M in jump?
Because you can't hear it.
Yeah, because the P is hiding behind the M. M and P, and P, are both made with the your lips on the lips. And so the P hides behind the M, and the dyslexic has trouble. It's not that they can't hear, but they can't, how do you say, Cindy, pull the two sounds apart?
Yep.
And
So,
why did you mix up the T and the P?
because I'm a nice dyslexic.
So, but I mean, you know why you did it is because jump kind of sounds like jumped. Like when kids spell jumped past tense, they'll put a T on the end because they don't know the rule of ED. I mean, that's
So by
another.
the way, when I heard you say jump, I actually heard you say jumped.
I know that's what I was thinking you did.
That's what I did. All
That's
right.
why. Okay. Anyway.
So this phonemic awareness piece is this really critical foundational piece that just plays a role as you move on in literacy. And by the way, there are a lot of kids out there who are not dyslexic necessarily, but never got these foundational skill sets. We can still teach it to them and dramatically improve their reading and spelling and transform their educational career. And with that, we'll be done with this lesson.
Idea.